Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in again for another episode in our Bible series. As you guys know, we are almost done with the book of Matthew. We only have 3 chapters left, and we are going to cover those 3 chapters today. I am also going to start something new with every book that we complete. We will have a trivia question at the end, and I will be sending out prizes through the mail for those of you who participate and get the trivia questions correct. As always, I thank you guys for tuning in with me, and we can get ready to start our study now. Starting with Matthew chapter 26. And I'm chewing gum today, guys. I'll try not to be too out there with it. Okay. When Jesus had finished saying all of these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, Passover begins in 2 days, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." At that same time, the leading priests and the elders were meeting at the residence of Caiaphas, the high priest, plotting how to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. While he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume and poured it over his head. The disciples were indignant when they saw this. "What a waste," they said. "It could have been sold for a high price and the money been given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, replied, "Why criticize this woman for doing such a thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, but me you will not always have. She has poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed." Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests and asked, "How much will you pay me to betray Jesus to you?" And they gave him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, Judas began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. On the first day of the festival of the unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover meal for you?" "As you go into the city," he told them, "you will see a certain man. Tell him, 'The teacher says, my time has come, and I will eat the Passover meal with my disciples at your house.'" So the disciples did as Jesus told them and prepared the Passover meal then. When it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12. While they were eating, he said, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, "Am I the one, Lord?" He replied, "One of you who has just eaten from this bowl will betray me. For the Son of Man must die, as the scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born." Judas, the one who would betray him, also asked, "Rabbi, am I the one?" And Jesus told him, "You have said it." As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this and eat it, for it is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. And he gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it new with you guys in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. On the way, Jesus told them, "Tonight all of you will desert me, for the scriptures say, God will strike the serpent and the sheep of the God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." And Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And all the other disciples vowed the same. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane. And he said, sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned to his disciples and found them asleep. And he said to Peter, "Couldn't you have watched with me for even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here." And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs, and they had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss." So Judas came straight to Jesus. "Greetings, Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him a kiss. Jesus said, "My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for." Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. "Put away your sword," Jesus told him. "Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what must happen now?" Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come to me with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures." At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled. Then the people who had arrested Jesus led him to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the religious law and the elders had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed him at a distance and came to the high priest's courtyard. He went in and sat with the guards and waited to see how it would all end. Inside, the leading priest and the entire high council were trying to find witnesses who would lie about Jesus so they could put him to death. But even though they found many who agreed to give false witnesses, they could not use anyone's testimony. Finally, 2 men came forward who declared, This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself? But Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him, I demand in the name of the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus replied, you have said it. And in the future, you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, blasphemy! Why do we need any other witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict? Guilty, they shouted. He deserves to die. Then they began to spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists. And some slapped him, jeering, prophesy to us, you Messiah, who hit you that time? Meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came over and said to him, you are one of those that was with Jesus, the Galilean. But Peter denied it in front of everyone. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. Again, Peter denied it, and this time with an oath. I don't even know the man, he said. A little later, some of the other bystanders came over to Peter and said, you must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent. Peter swore, a curse on me if I'm lying. I don't know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. Suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows, you will deny three times that you even know me. And he went away weeping bitterly. Chapter 26 describes one of the darkest hours in Jesus' walk. It was one of the darkest hours because Jesus was overwhelmed with the task that he was soon to face. Yes, he had the Spirit of God, but he was still a man. And he came down and he was bearing the sufferings of man, and then in the end had a fate of dying. Dying for being innocent. Dying for people who had problems with their loyalty. As you can see, even Jesus's best friends couldn't even stay up and pray with him when he needed them the most. So in Jesus's walk, he got disappointed a lot. He was betrayed a lot and severely mistreated. So we see all the moments that are leading up to the death of Jesus and how the religious leaders plotted against him for this moment. But still, Jesus let his disciples know that this was meant to happen and that it was all in God's control. So even though the Pharisees and the religious leaders finally were able to execute what they wanted to do, as you can see, it only happened because it was God's time, because they wanted to do this a while ago. They were just always fearful, or so they thought. All of these things that stopped them from doing this, whether it was them fearing the crowd or not feeling like it was the right time or not being able to come up with a legitimate claim against Jesus, it didn't matter because the moment that was ordained for Jesus did not happen until God said, okay, now it's time. So though this is a dark point in the scriptures, you can take a hope in that, seeing how it's all in God's hands, even your moments when you are persecuted. So if there are those of you out there right now who are being persecuted for your beliefs, who are preaching the gospel, just know that every point of your persecution is being monitored by the Father, and it's for a reason, and it's for your good in the end, because Jesus' sacrifice and his suffering profited the whole world. So your suffering and your persecution is profiting you and profiting others around you, whether you can see it or not. And God won't allow your pain to endure always. But take courage if you are in that time right now of persecution. Know that your Father is watching you, and that nobody can do anything to you that Jesus does not allow to happen if you are truly his servant. So let's move on to 27, because we all can already imagine the pain of Peter's betrayal. That, as you can see, Peter was heartbroken at the end of it all. So we know in his heart of hearts, he did not want to betray Jesus, yet what Jesus said came to pass. And Peter, who had so much passion and fire in his words, denied Jesus and left him to bear his cross alone. Matthew chapter 27. Very early in the morning, the leading priest and the elders of the people met again to lay plans for putting Jesus to death. And they bound him and led him away and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, realized that Jesus had been condemned to die, he was filled with remorse. So he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the leading priest and the elders. I have sinned, he declared, for I have betrayed an innocent man. What do we care? They retorted. That's your problem. Then Judas threw the silver coins down in the temple and went out and hanged himself. The leading priest picked up the coins. It wouldn't be right to put this money in the temple treasury, they said, since it was payment for murder. After some discussion, they finally decided to buy a potter's field, and they made it into a cemetery for foreigners. That is why the field is still called the Field of Blood. This fulfilled the prophecy of Jeremiah that says, they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price at which he was valued by the people of Israel, and purchased the potter's field as the Lord directed. Now Jesus was standing before Pilate, the Roman governor. Are you the king of the Jews? The governor asked him. Jesus replied, you have said it. But when the leading priest and the elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent. Don't you hear all of these charges they are bringing against you? Pilate demanded. But Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. Now it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. And this year, there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah? He knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. Just then, as Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him a message. "Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about him last night." Meanwhile, the leading priest and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor asked again, "Which of these two do you want me to release to you?" And the crowd shouted back, "Barabbas!" Pilate responded, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him!" "Why?" Pilate demanded. "What crime has he committed?" But the mob roared even louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours." And all the people yelled back, "We will take responsibility for his death, we and our children." So Pilate released Barabbas to them, and he ordered Jesus flogged with the lead-tipped whip. Then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. They placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt below him in mockery and taunted, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spit on him and grabbed the stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him again. They led him away to be crucified. Along the way, they came across a man named Simon, who was from Cyrene, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And they went out to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. The soldiers gave Jesus wine mixed with bitter gall, but when he had tasted it, he refused to drink it. After that, they had nailed him to the cross. The soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. Then they sat around and kept guard as he hung there. A sign was fastened above Jesus' head, announcing the charge against him. It read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. The people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery. "Look at you now," they yelled at him. "You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then, if you are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross." The leading priests and the teachers of the religious law and the elders also mocked Jesus. "He saved others," they scoffed, "but he can't save himself. So he is the King of Israel, is he? Let him come down from that cross right now, and we will believe in him. He trusted God, so let God rescue him now, if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" Even the revolutionaries who were crucified with him ridiculed him in the same way. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice, I don't want to say this wrong, but I believe it says, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani." I don't know how to say that, guys, but Jesus cried out with a loud voice, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine and holding it up to him on a reed stick so that he could drink. But the rest said, "Wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him." Then Jesus shouted again, and he released his spirit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, and the tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection. And went into the holy city of Jerusalem and appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and all that had happened. And they said, "This man truly was the Son of God." And many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the brother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. As evening approached, Joseph, a rich man from Arimathea, who had become a follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate issued an order to release it to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a long sheet of clean linen cloth. He placed it in his own new tomb, which had been carved out of the rock, and then he rolled a great stone across the entrance and left. Both Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting across from the tomb watching. The next day on the Sabbath, the leading priests and the Pharisees went to see Pilate. They told him, "Sir, remember that deceiver once said while he was still alive, 'After 3 days I would rise from the dead.' So we request that you seal the tomb until the 3rd day. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body and telling everyone he was raised from the dead. If that happens, we will be worse off than we were at first." And Pilate replied, "Take the guards and secure it the best you can." So they sealed the tomb and posted guards to protect it. Despicable, despicable, despicable. That is what comes to mind when I read this whole scenario of how Jesus was tormented and tortured, rejected and abandoned for our sake. We know that what happens in the end of this story. We know about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But in reading his walk and his battles, you can get a glimpse of how some of our walks will be with Jesus. It may not be exactly the same because he has different stories for us all, but none of his children are going to live a life that is persecution free. And so in here, the enemies of Jesus were so consumed with hatred and wickedness that even after his death, they feared. They feared that Jesus would rise from the dead, or that his disciples would steal his body and try to tell the people that they were right and that Jesus was the Messiah. And so they were telling Pilate that basically the disciples would stir up confusion by pretending like Jesus rose again. So they end up sending guards to go and protect the tomb because They want to protect their stories. They want to be done with it. They were so satisfied that they had killed Jesus. So satisfied that they had gotten rid of him. And that is mind-blowing. That is mind-blowing. That hate can run that deep. Let's move on to chapter 28. Early on Sunday morning, as the new day was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to visit the tomb. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and rolled aside the stone and sat on it. And his face shone like lightning, and his clothes were as white as snow. The guards shook with fear when they saw him, and they fell into a dead faint. Then the angel spoke to the woman. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He isn't here. He is risen from the dead, just as he said would happen. Come and see where his body was lying. Now go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead and that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. Remember what I have told you." The women ran quickly from the tomb. They were frightened, but also filled with great joy. And they rushed to give the disciples the angel's message. And as they went, Jesus met them and greeted them. And they ran to him, grasped his feet, and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Don't be afraid. Go tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and they will see me there." As the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and told the leading priests what had happened. A meeting with the elders was called, and they decided to give the soldiers a large bribe. They told the soldiers, "You must say, 'Jesus' disciples came during the night while we were sleeping, and they stole his body.' If the governor hears about it, he will stand up for you so you won't get in trouble." So the guards accepted the bribe and said what they were told to say. Their story spread widely among the Jews, and they still tell it today. Even the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some of them doubted. Jesus came and told his disciples, "I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you, and be sure of this: I am with you always, even until the end of the age." So, in chapter 28, I am pleased to say this is a version that was written by Matthew, his account of what happened or what he perceived during his time with Jesus. And chapter 28 is his account of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So that was a big victory, and that is the thing that brings us great joy, to know that our God is alive and that he was victorious and that there is nobody as great as him, the man who conquered all temptations, all sins, and even his biggest mission, he fulfilled it and was successful. So we also note that in chapter 28, you see that God's enemies just could not let up. And they created a lie that was so big that it's still existing today. There are people who are still under the lie that a corrupt and evil generation created about an innocent man. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? A living lie. There are some of you out there today who are under a living lie because of these corrupt people. There are corrupt and evil men who create stories and lies about innocent people for their own personal gain. Because of the wickedness, the evil, and the deceit in their hearts, they do these things. And they did this to Jesus. And they couldn't even stop. Even after Jesus died, they had to cover up. They had to continue to lie, continue to cover up. Imagine living like that. Imagine living like that, where you always have to cover up your life. You have to cover up your whole life because it's based on lies and not truth. It's based on hate and deception. But you know what? There's a great thing, and we're going to get to that as we go on. Even that lie that is existing today, it's making me angry just thinking about it. That a lie from years ago is covering some people's mind today. But I have great news for you guys, because Jesus said in the end times that lie is going to be torn down and it's going to be broken. And I thank Jesus for that, because it's a big lie. It's a big lie. Jesus is alive. His disciples did not steal him out of the tomb. He is alive today. He is working on me. I can feel the love and the presence of Jesus. I hear and feel him teaching me, changing me, growing me. And he is not dead. God is not dead. Jesus Christ is God. There's no blasphemy in that. He is all loving. He was an innocent man that was put to death by people in power who were corrupt. And we all know how it feels to be sucked in to stories and ideas that we're not 100% sure about. But because we're so trusting, we as people, a lot of us, we don't do research. We just trust people who are in authority and we don't question them. But if they did it to Jesus in that day on this scale of wickedness, you guys sharpen up. There are people that are definitely doing it now. And I only got into that because of the fact that the word of God says that lie that they told still exists today. People still believe that. But it's okay. God loves his people. And we will see prophecy fulfilled. As we were talking about prophecy in the beginning of Matthew, when we were reading it, of how a lot of the Old Testament prophecies were fulfilled in the New Testament and are still being fulfilled today. Let's watch out for that prophecy, because it is going to happen. You're going to start hearing people confess that they now believe, and they no longer believe in that lie. They now believe that Jesus was the Son of God, because they're going to have personal encounters with him, I believe. But to be honest with you guys, I don't know how God is going to do it. It's just another prophecy that we're waiting to see happen. And so I had a lot of emotions right now about this story. I'm grateful, guys. That is actually it. 28 was the last chapter in Matthew. So starting this weekend, God willing, we will be moving on to Mark. And once we complete Mark, that is when the trivia will begin. It's either going to be a trivia or a game after we complete each book, rather. And yeah, there'll be prizes, and I'll send them to you. I'll send them out to you guys personally as we go on. So guys, if you have any comments about the episode today, feel free to write it down below. I would love to hear from you guys. It's always great to have different communities in the different areas of our life. Christian communities, or just, good discussions and conversations that are stimulating, especially in this time. So whether that be on social media or somewhere, some gatherings, a club that you go to, it's always good to network with other people and strengthen one another. So yes, guys, comment below if there's anything I missed. If you have any insight, just let me know. If not, thank you guys so much for watching, for tuning in. I pray that you all are blessed by this word today, that you're inspired, that you're edified, and I hope and pray that I see you guys again on Saturday or Sunday. And I guess that's it. I love you guys. Be blessed.
My God's not dead, he's surely